OOT is a game with a huge arsenal of weapons and tools that you can use to deal damage to enemies. On the melee side, you've got 3, 4, 5 different swords, Deku Sticks, and the Megaton Hammer, each with 2 different damage tiers depending on the attack you use. There are 2 different kinds of explosives, 7 different kinds of projectiles, a giant magic fireball, 3 shields you can use to reflect enemy attacks back at them in different ways, and of course, all of those are just the intended options. If you start adding glitches to the mix, there are a bunch of other interesting ways to deal damage too. So, this begs the question, what's the most powerful attack in the game? Let's figure it out. We're going to focus mostly on melee attacks for this video. The projectiles and magic attacks are generally pretty low damage, so they won't be super important to talk about. But let's start off with the weakest attacks in the game and build up from there. Are there any attacks that do nothing at all? There sure are. A few enemies have specific resistances that cause certain attacks to do 0 damage. For example, a basic Kokiri Sword Slash does no damage to Torch Slugs and Freezards, which can kind of be interpreted as those enemies having 1 armor value, thus ignoring attacks which do 1 damage. But then a few enemies such as Skulltulas and Skullwaltulas are totally immune to hammer jump attacks specifically for some reason. This is extra weird because they aren't immune to regular hammer swings, which are weaker than the jump attacks generally. There isn't really any logical way to understand this one, and it's probably just a mistake. A second ago I mentioned that the hammer's jump attack is stronger than its normal attack, and that's true for every melee weapon too. A weapon's jump slash is always double its base attack value. Kokiri Sword has a base of 1, Master Sword, Deku Stick, and Megaton Hammer all have a base value of 2, and the Bigoron Sword's base value is 4. All the fancy different kinds of swings you can do with these weapons always use the base value. Then the jump attack gets a ×2 multiplier. Outside of situational resistances, enemies will pretty much always take these damage amounts under normal circumstances. And that brings us to the exception, because this is OOT, so of course there's no actual rules here. The crouch stab is special. If you have a shield, crouch behind it, and you use your melee weapon, you'll perform a crouch stab attack. This attack doesn't actually have its own damage value, but instead takes on the damage value and weapon properties of whatever your last melee attack was since you zoned into the area. So if you do a Bigoron Sword Jump Slash for 8 damage, all of your subsequent stab attacks will also do 8 damage until you do another kind of melee swing to replace it. Pretty neat trick, and since the stab retains the properties of the previous attack and not just the damage amount, you can use it to get around enemy resistances. For a great example, Ganon is resistant to literally every damage type in the game except for the Master Sword and Deku Sticks, but pretend we don't care about that for now. No matter what the normal damage is for a certain attack, Ganon will always just take 1 damage from it, even if it's the mighty Bigoron Jump Slash. The problem, of course, is that Ganon knocks away the Master Sword at the beginning of the battle, leaving you with only 1 damage options for the first phase. But if you just do a Master Sword Jump Slash before the battle starts, then you can use crouch stabs with any other weapon to retain the Master Sword properties and finish the phase 4 times more quickly. Alright, we know all about the basic attacks and what they can do. Now how do we get something more powerful? Surely in our quest for the most powerful attack in the game, we don't just get stuck at 8 damage Bigoron Jump Slashes, right? Well, before we consider doing more damage per attack, how about we just do more attacks per unit of time? This is where the infamous ISG comes in, the Infinite Sword Glitch. ISG happens when you interrupt a crouch stab on the final frame, preventing the sword's hitbox from deactivating, so you can essentially just run around with a buzzsaw in your hand doing damage on every single frame. But how much damage? Well, since it's just an extension of the crouch stab attack, it'll be whatever your last melee attack was before the stab that initiated the glitch. So if you do a Bigoron Sword Jump Slash for 8 damage, and then get ISG from a crouch stab, you'll run around doing 8 damage every frame, and you can take down some of the biggest, baddest bosses in no time flat. Okay, this is getting pretty good, but I still think we can do better. How about more than 8 damage per attack now? Well, if you thought crouch stabs were broken, wait till you get a load of this one. In steps the empty jump slash. When you do a jump slash with any melee weapon, there are 2 different hitboxes, one that exists while you're in the air, and one that takes over once you hit the ground. Right before each of these activates, the game checks to see what item is in Link's hand, then uses that number to index into a table of possible damage types, and reads what it finds there as the damage type for the hitbox it's creating. But there are a few different ways that I won't really get into in this video, whereby we can remove the weapon from Link's hands while he's in the air phase of his jump slash. So when he lands, he has no item in hand, leading to an unintended value of 0 being used to index into the damage type table. The value it finds here is completely unrelated data, but the game still tries to interpret it as damage types. So what kind of damage do we end up doing? Well, it's complicated. It ends up being quite a few things all rolled into one. This one attack has properties of Deku Nuts, Deku Stick Slashes, Pot Throws, Slingshot Projectiles, the Boomerang, Master Sword and Bigoron Sword Slashes, Ice Arrows, Din's Fire, Kokiri Sword and Bigoron Sword Jump Attacks, a couple of remnant beta weapons called Shadow Arrows and Ice Magic, and 2 unknown damage types left over from development. And now, the question is, how much damage does that all do? Well, again, it's complicated. This attack can take on all kinds of interesting secondary properties besides damage, like burning webs and lighting torches like Din's Fire, or freezing stuff like Ice Arrows, or even activating eye switches. But when it comes to the actual damage, there's some priority logic in the game code which makes it pick one of the involved damage values when attacking an enemy. Different enemies will respond differently here, and many of them will end up being totally immune to this wacky attack. Bummer. But I didn't explain all this to you just to let you down, I promise. Turns out some enemies, like the Iron Knuckle, are especially weak to the unknown damage type that they prioritize. In fact, they are weaker to this than anything else in the game. An Iron Knuckle will take 10 damage per glitch damage attack, setting a new record for the most powerful attack in the game. And since crouch stabs take on the properties of whatever your last attack was, you can do the empty jump slash glitch once, and then have the glitch damage properties on all of your subsequent stabs, and even transition it into ISG. We did it! We used some complicated glitches to do more damage with a single attack than any intended action programmed into the whole game. But we're not done. Could it be possible to do even more than 10 damage in a single attack? Can we find the most brutal, destructive action Link can take in his entire journey? Well, we've talked about enemies having resistance to certain attacks, but what about weaknesses? Meet the Wolfos. Just a poor, unsuspecting doggo going about his day as a 2D entity, waiting for the approach of some random Hylian to suddenly remember that his reality includes a third dimension too. He should have stayed flat. Wolfos don't seem particularly special at first glance from a damage perspective. They're pretty agile and hard to hit, and they don't have that much health. Only 8. But as Child Link with only the Kokiri Sword at your disposal, when you're fighting a Wolfos such as the one guarding the Sacred Forest Meadow, getting through that 8 HP can take a while. Knowing all this, the developers decided to hide a pretty unique secret inside the Wolfos' butt. If you manage to catch him by the tail, you'll be rewarded with a whopping 4 times damage multiplier on whatever attack you just performed. You can see how this could get interesting. So with one well-placed 2 damage Deku Stick Slash, you can deal all 8 HP's worth of damage in one swing, killing the Wolfos in a single attack. But what if the Wolfos had even more health? Let's hack him into a beefy boy. The number you see on the screen here is his current health after my change. Let's go for the big one. A Bigoron Sword Jump Slash with a ×4 multiplier. And boom, 32 damage all in one go. We just sent that Wolfos to the Shadow Realm. So with this crazy butt multiplier, that means you can get through all of the Wolfos' normal 8 HP in only 2 Kokiri Sword Slash. Wait, that was just 1 slash. He has 8 HP, a Kokiri Sword Slash does 1 damage with a ×4 multiplier. It should have taken 2 hits, right? Right, and it did take 2 hits. Watch it again, in slow motion this time. Did you see it? No? Okay, one more time, even slower. How about then? Still no? Good, because there's nothing to see. But I did hit that Wolfos twice, except it was just twice in the same frame. Normally, there are protections in place to make sure you can't deal damage to one enemy multiple times per frame, but Wolfos are a lucky case. It's actually possible to double up with good positioning and timing, and if you do that from the back, now we have a ×8 multiplier. Let's hack him up one more time. This is it, the big one. a Bigoron sword jump slash with a ×8 multiplier. This Wolfos is literally stronger than Ganon. He has 60% more health than the tankiest enemies in the entire game. And one shot. This is where the story ends. A poetic ending, if you ask me. The most powerful attack in Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64 is 64 damage. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, consider subscribing for more Zelda speedrunning content, and I'll see you next time.